want to thank all Americans for pulling together, for coming together, for doing what they have to do. It's been incredible. It's been inspirational. All over the world they're watching. And of course, you've heard it 1,000 times. Wash your hands, good hygiene, all of that. But social distancing, keep away. It's going to have no place to go. And I just want to thank you as president. I want to thank you for the incredible job you're all doing. There's spirit in our country like never before. We pulled together as a unit. We pulled together as a country. We will prevail together. We love the USA.
This is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and we're seeing the greatness of the American people on display every day, at every level. Once we beat back the virus, China must be held accountable. Their hostile government cares more about optics than the lives of not only their own citizens, but the world community. This massive cover-up in the critical early stages of this disease, frankly unforgivable. It is an indisputable fact that China lied. People all over the world suffering and dying as a result of these lies. Axios recently put together what is a comprehensive timeline that you need to see. We'll start on December 10, 2019, last year. That's when one of the first known coronavirus patients becomes ill. Then on December 27th, Wuhan health officials determined a new type of coronavirus was spreading. 3 days later, on social media, top director at the Wuhan Central Hospital tried to warn the public.
Tired of this coronavirus. You don't know what to do. Quit hoarding. Try to stay home, even though I'm not staying home, but I got stuff to do. But limit your contact with people. Man, I ain't gotta say all this stuff. You guys ain't retarded. I'll make a little video and enjoy it. If you watch it, I don't know.
Well, all of a sudden, Americans are living in a less secure world. They're feeling economically vulnerable for the reasons you just heard. They're uncertain of what's going to happen in the very near future. In any crisis like this, it's important that leaders help the public feel safe, secure, and confident. All of a sudden, those daily briefings from the president have been helping, I think, in that way. But in some parts of the country, the authorities are doing just the opposite. In Los Angeles, Cleveland, other cities, officials have begun releasing prisoners early. They want to do that anyway, of course, but now they can say it's to contain the coronavirus. They're not explaining how exactly, they're just doing it. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley wants the federal government to join in this by releasing its own prisoners. Watch.
You know, what is the guidance, both for those that are incarcerated and for staff? And that the BOP use their full powers. I think now would be the time to commute some sentences, to exact clemency, and to take care of our most vulnerable. 10% of those that are incarcerated are over the age of 60 and already have an underlying condition. We should be using compassionate release.
Notice there's no compassion for the normal people huddled in their homes, sitting there as thousands of criminals are released onto the streets. Nobody cares about them. She doesn't. It's obvious. But there's more. In many cities, authorities are actually ordering police to stop protecting the public, to stop doing their jobs. In the city of Philadelphia, police have been ordered to avoid arrests, even for significant crimes. Drug offenses, prostitution, vandalism obviously are tolerated. But now, burglary and car theft get a pass. A person could break into your home in Philadelphia and not be arrested. Imagine that. Instead, the police will just issue a summons for a later court appearance.
Telling us,
we're in the middle of an earthquake, Tony.
This is a lot for them to really handle. Again,
oh my
this
God.
is impacting 1,000. Oh, are you guys okay?
Oh my gosh.
Are you guys okay?
We are. Oh my gosh.
You just.
We're hanging on. We are rocking.
Yeah, are you guys under the
Holy
desk?
cow.
Well, we've got a big-time earthquake here right now.
This is big.
Yeah. It's scary. Our studio here
I
is
just want to
just
make sure you guys are
shaking,
safe. Are you
lights
guys under the
swinging.
We're on the bottom floor of a 26-story building in downtown Salt Lake City. Looking around right now to see how things are
Yeah, we
outside.
got people outside kind of running around. What is going on?
So what's up, everybody? We about to get some martial law type theater campaign coming on, man. It's about to get crazy. Wild Wild West. I don't know. Ohio, find it here. You ain't gonna find nothing in Ohio. Everybody wants to leave Ohio, but everybody always comes back. I don't know why, except for my dad. Backyard sky. Armageddon news. Yeah, we planning. You know what? All this craziness, it ain't about the flu. 300 people a day die from the normal ass flu. You got all this going on. And, I mean, the numbers don't add up. Nothing adds up. I just don't get it. It's like they're planning for something bigger to happen.
Same effect with something called herd immunity. The expectation is that enough people will become infected with the virus that they develop immunity. This would stop it spreading widely and protect the vulnerable. Here's an example. We know that each person who catches the virus is likely to pass it to between 2.4 and 3 others. But if enough people develop immunity, then transmission is reduced considerably because there are fewer susceptible people. But how many is enough depends on how contagious a disease is. As this chart shows, measles is very infectious. One person can pass it on to 12 others. And so for herd immunity to work, around 90% need to be immune. But coronavirus reproduces at a far slower rate, so successful containment requires just 60% of people to have been infected and developed resistance.
I feel disrespected. I feel hurt. You know, I feel this hurt that these guys won't never understand. You know, I try to tell them, but you know, the only reason why we're moving back is because they're armed, batons, tear gas, riot gear, weapons, rubber bullets. That's what it takes for them to push us back. They carry weapons because they're scared.
What does this land mean to you, this traditional land?
This land means everything. Look at over there, all the buffalo. Look at all those buffalo. Look at all those buffalo there. They're coming for you guys. Be careful.
27 hard, bitch.
The number of cases that each infectious person generates can vary for different diseases, and we call this number the basic reproduction number, or R0 for short. Now, R0 doesn't depend on how severe the symptoms are, rather it's a measure of how transmissible the infection is, and as a result we can use it to work out what's required to stop an epidemic. One of the ways we can stop epidemics is using vaccination. Now, you might think that to stop a disease you need to vaccinate an entire population, but actually this isn't the case. Of course, if you vaccinate someone, it protects them and stops them from getting infected, but because people who are vaccinated can't pass it on, vaccination also stops the chains of transmission, and that means that this can create a protective barrier which actually stops the epidemic spreading within a population. Say the basic reproduction number of an infection is 2. This means that in a fully susceptible population, each infected person will on average give the disease to 2 other people. But if 50% of the population are vaccinated, each infectious person on average will only be able to give it to 1 of these 2 people, and this means that the epidemic wouldn't be expected to grow over time. This is known as herd immunity. Herd immunity means that as long as a certain proportion of the population is vaccinated, the disease won't be able to transmit within that population. We've seen that if the basic reproduction number R0 is 2, we'd need to vaccinate half the population to stop disease transmission. By the same logic, if R0 is 3, we'd need to vaccinate 2/3 of the population. If we keep going, for highly infectious diseases like measles, we need to vaccinate 17 out of every 18 people, or about 94% of the population, to stop transmission. Herd immunity is especially useful for protecting members of the population who can't be vaccinated, perhaps because they're too old, too young, or have vulnerable immune systems. If they're surrounded by people who have received the vaccine, then that can protect them from infection. If, however, people forgo vaccination, then the herd can no longer protect these people. This means that the population as a whole can be vulnerable to outbreaks.
You might think it's a cold, and it could be, but COVID-19 could escalate. Here's what you need to know. According to the World Health Organization China Joint Mission on COVID-19, as of February 20th, 80% of laboratory-confirmed cases were mild to moderate, 14% were severe, and 6% were critical. Just to be clear, a mild case of COVID-19 is not like a mild cold. The symptoms will still be pretty severe. Anything less than needing oxygen puts you in this category. Severe cases do need supplemental oxygen, and critical ones are defined by respiratory or multi-organ failure. The symptoms, treatments, and timelines of having the disease vary, depending on which category patients fall into. So let's break down what having COVID-19 looks like day to day for each level of severity. It can take as few as 2 or as many as 14 days after being exposed to the novel coronavirus for the first symptom to develop. This is when it might feel like a cold or the common flu. Many patients develop fevers early on. The World Health Organization China Joint Mission saw that about 88% of people who had COVID-19 had a fever. Another study out of China showed that while only 44% of patients had a fever on admission to a hospital, 89% eventually developed one. But there have been some cases that led with gastrointestinal symptoms. Diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and/or abdominal discomfort may appear a couple of days before respiratory symptoms. This isn't the norm, though, because COVID-19 is a respiratory disease. That means for most patients, the virus will start and end with the lungs. In the early days of infection, the virus invades lung cells. Specifically, this can damage the cilia, the hair-like projections that move around to keep airways clear of mucus and debris. When cells get infected, they die and shed off, adding to the debris and hindering your body's ability to keep stuff out of the lungs and trachea. The inflammation causes damage, and damage causes more inflammation, and this cycle could continue until there's no healthy tissue left. And inflammation might explain why a dry cough is one of the most common symptoms. Same goes for shortness of breath and phlegm production. Other symptoms that can appear around this time are fatigue, sore throat, headache, joint or muscle pain, chills, and a runny nose. By day 5, patients with pre-existing conditions might find that they have trouble breathing, and it usually takes about 7 days for a person to go to a hospital. Mild cases, though, usually clear up by this time. But those with moderate to critical cases will have developed pneumonia, which can range from non-life-threatening to severe. Recovery time for these patients could be anywhere from a few days to weeks. For some severe and critical cases, though, symptoms can escalate into acute respiratory distress syndrome. ARDS is an illness that happens when fluid builds up in the lungs. Inflammation triggers a flood of immune cells that are meant to target the infection. They're usually isolated to infected areas, but sometimes the body goes overboard, which is when the immune cells start killing anything in their path, including healthy cells.
Hearts beats. I'm backyard.